Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the amazing, wonderful, wild, and weird world of Alternative Tentacles on the Alternative Tentacles Batcast. My name is Dominic Davi. I am once again your host as I guide you through the weird, wild, and wonderful world that is Alternative Tentacles and the mind of Jello Biafra. And today we have a very special episode, and I've been very excited about this episode, and I'm really happy it's finally happening. I would like to introduce Skip Heller and Lena Marie Cardinale of Voodoo 5, the newest members of Alternative Tentacles family. Hi, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us. This is, I'm so thrilled I spilled her coffee.
It is a very exciting moment. I understand.
It is for me, because if 15-year-old me could have seen this moment coming, I would have felt vindicated back then.
I know that feeling. I actually am very familiar with that feeling of having your band get to a spot like a milestone. And, it's weird to say this being associated with the staff of Alternative Tentacles, but I am. But as I joked before we recorded, I'm also an artist. I'm in Tsunami Bomb, and so when Tsunami Bomb became involved with Alternative Tentacles, that was that feeling of like, this is a milestone moment. We're working with this is a label with that has really affected the scene. It has helped build what punk is perceived and what punk is, and it's a very, it's a collector's label, and it's has such a range of music that's found on it. It's really an honor to be a part of it. And it's for you guys. With you're opening a whole new
Yeah, I was going to say,
area.
in terms of what people's perception of what punk is, here I am to go, no, it's not.
It's Exotica too. It's jazz.
To me, and I'm just going to speak for myself, because I've gotten into arguments with people over the years that some of them are regional, some of them are generational, some of them are musical, as to what punk is. But sometimes, you gotta greet the question like, is punk rock a thing, or is punk rock more of a means of operation?
Right.
Because when I was young, the first thing that appealed to me about the Ramones was they weren't Farner.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't Fleetwood Mac. They weren't part of this sort of, even at that age, I was just like, this. I liked bluegrass, and I liked folk music, and I liked oldies. That's what I liked. That music that got up close to you and addressed you in a very direct way. Also Dr. Demento, believe it or not.
I love Dr. Demento.
Yeah. So to find a way into a world that did not involve itself with Carry On My Wayward Son or something like that was really important to me.
Right.
Because the only new artist who I was really avidly into that was in the top 40 was like Stevie Wonder and Earth, Wind and Fire.
Fantastic.
And yeah, and that stuff is still, I don't think I've gone a week without listening to one or both in my whole life. But that's, that stuff, I was born into those records, that was coming around. The Ramones were the first rock band with a new record that I ever bought a new record of.
Oh.
First new band, new thing. And, that was my first new rock and roll band purchase.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So to move, but also the thing with the Ramones was, and you can use the Ramones as kind of a template for a lot of things, is, oh, there they are doing California Sun by the Rivieras. Who are the Rivieras? And then you find that 45 for a dime. at the Village Thrift, or one of the Catholic thrift stores way up in North Philly. And, that's interesting. And then you find out California Sun was originally a rhythm and blues record, like a saxophone instrumental. And you get that. And just from one Ramones record, now you've made the jump into surf music and then rhythm and blues instrumentals. Mm-hmm. And, similarly, Philadelphia, and full disclosure here, you lived in Philadelphia for a while. I grew up in Philadelphia. Philadelphia, in addition to having 7 art schools, so the punk rock scene took flight very early in the LGBTQ scene, did a lot to characterize the punk rock scene and the art scene, which is really important to my worldview. Because, Philadelphia is a place that a lot of people came to from someplace else.
Yeah, it's true.
So you meet all these people who come from different parts of the world. And, well, some of them speak Spanish. And there you are at that same thrift store where you found your copy of California Sun by the Rivieras. And here's a Ray Barretto 45 of El Watusi. Mm-hmm. And maybe your only exposure to Latin music before that moment is the opening of Don't You Worry About a Thing by Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
And all these things keep spiraling out. And none of them are Farner or Fleetwood Mac or the Eagles. Mm-hmm. So instead of having to settle for the really terrible corporate rock situation, for a lot cheaper, you can make it up as you go along. A dime for a single, a quarter for an LP, and and then you're watching Twilight Zone, and you're going, ooh, okay, and you're getting into old paperbacks, and you're trying to dress like Rod Serling in addition to having your leather jacket, which you might have lifted from your father when he was in a motorcycle club that had been busted by Frank Rizzo in the late 50s.
That's amazing. That's one of the things I've loved so much about the punk scene, and my own introduction to it was very similar in the sense that like it was always one record, and everything from the thank yous to what bands they were thanking and who they were mentioning, and then finding out who, and then looking up who they were. And you didn't have the internet, so you had to go find it and ask the record store or look for where you could get it and see what, you'd have to kind of hoof it and try and find out who this band was, to finding out if you were lucky enough to find a spot where this band was interviewed and they talked about their influences and what kind of bands that they were bringing in to their music, and then going to look up that. Just like you said, that's one of the features of punk rock that I've always loved. And Alternative Tentacles, I feel like Jello has done a very good job of building a label around that concept. And one of the things
I think a lot of that concept comes from being the son of a librarian.
That's true.
I would say that's very accurate. The son of a librarian.
Oh, so, no kidding. You have that similar
yeah,
background.
That's to me, Jello Biafra is another, old guy whose mom is a, retired librarian, and, he likes cats. That's,
well,
back in the day, it used to be, like, hey, have you heard this band on this label? And they're singing about, taking a hatchet to famous national monuments. And now it's like going, man, have you tried this cat food?
It's funny. He's definitely a character, and it's hard to describe that to people who haven't met them, that just see this one. They see the parts that we present as musicians, the character of the part of ourselves that we put into our music and perform, which is definitely an important part, but it's definitely not the whole person. But it's interesting because like his perception, I've always loved. He had a statement one time where he described like one of the most interesting things he had to say about punk rock that I think has definitely prevailed was that when he started Dead Kennedys with those guys and they were trying to develop a sound, he says often, he goes, we weren't trying to be a punk band. We were trying to be a good band. We were
Yeah.
trying to listen to as many things as possible and bring it into our music and make it as unique as possible and interesting as possible. And he goes, and my one problem with punk rock now, and this is something I feel like I drive home a lot when I'm talking to guests, other artists on this show, is the one thing he's trying to drive home. He's like, I don't want to hear your band that sounds like my friend's band 20, 30 years ago. I want to hear you listen to that and go further. And I think that really it answers that question that you had posed. Like, is punk rock a thing, just a style of a simple style of music, and that's defined by distorted guitar and four on the floor drums, and has this kind of approach that is all based around Ramones and the Sex Pistols and the Clash, or is it an attitude that we apply to our music and we apply to our creativity and how we deliver it to the people around us and share it? And I
Well,
think it can
I
be both, but it's mainly the second, the latter.
by the time by the time 1980 had come around, I had been playing the guitar for 4 or 5 years, so I had gotten past just bar chords. And actually, when I first started playing guitar, I was more interested in folk music. So, I had some skills that you didn't hear in the Steve Jones universe. And, like, for instance, just hold on, like learning how to go. So, Bob Dylan,
Yeah.
because everybody who played the guitar seemed to know some Dylan and some Beatles. So, you learn Blackbird, you learn Girl from the North Country, you learn, whatever. So when the time came around to get to Sheena as a punk rocker, which was
It's a great song.
was the first punk rock record I bought, the 45, with the picture sleeve for 99 cents at Keller's House of Music in Westmont, New Jersey. Um, the challenge to me was just to have that really even right hand. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And after you develop that, you're listening, and this is going to be a controversial statement, but I never thought the Clash were a very good band. So learning anything Mick Jones played could be accomplished kind of in real time.
I mean,
And
that's
then
not
there's
untrue. Though Paul Simeon is a little bit more challenging with some of the approaches that he had on the bass. But
yeah,
I
he
do feel like their strength came from more of their rhythm section, and I think that Joe Strummer would say the same.
yeah, although I would say that rhythm section didn't have for me what Rick Buckler and Bruce Foxton had.
I'm not going to argue that. I'm not going to
So,
argue that.
but again, like Paul Weller, he was another guy who was doing something other than just playing bar chords.
Right.
And I think a lot of it was just the way he filled space up
Hmm.
while he was singing. And then, sorry, I'll apologize in advance to Biafra for this one, but East Bay Ray had some different moves to the basket. A lot of the, to use the technical term, a lot of employment of the diminished fifth.
Hmm.
Kind of after that, the next people playing guitar that really excited me
Hmm.
were Ill from Gang of Four.
Really?
Uh, just because now it wasn't chords the way you were used to. It was this real, to use Vernon Reid's term, smash and scatteration guitar sound. So Andy Gill, Viv Albertine from the Slits, Mark Moreland from Wall of Voodoo, and the guitar opening on Satisfaction by Devo. That got in my ear in a way.
Right.
And then how the rhythm section would have to characterize itself underneath that type of playing, because now it wasn't just your four on the floor with the guitar the way Johnny Ramone and Steve Jones were. So I got interested in reggae music. I got interested in Peter Gunn by Henry Mancini
Fantastic
because,
piece.
yeah. And I got to Henry Mancini because of this band called the B-52s. And I read an article about them in a newspaper. Back then, for you young people, things did not drop, as they say. There was a release date and it was protracted. So if there was a magazine about records that were coming out in April, it came out in March. And you would read about the records in March. And then every Tuesday in April, the new records would come out. They'd ship on Monday and arrive on Tuesday. And the B-52s were written about, and there was a remark in there about Peter Gunn guitars and Yma Sumac vocals.
Oh,
So
that's a sentence right there.
yeah, and I didn't know what Peter Gunn or Yma Sumac were,
Oh,
but I had heard Rock Lobster and I liked it.
yeah.
So back in those days in Philadelphia, at the corner of Fifth and South, was a bookstore called Book Trader, and it had a record store in the back, and it had a 99-cent box. And out of that 99-cent box, did I find Peter Gunn, more music from Peter Gunn,
Yeah.
and Yma Sumac, voice of the Exotica. And, I bought them because I said, well, if the B-52s like it, as we were saying about reading interviews with people, there's probably something in there for me. And there really was. But it also started making me think about a greater world away from rock music played by white people,
Right.
you know, especially British ones with certain types of expensive haircuts who look to be wearing white silk pantsuits, you know. And it kind of helped me rebel against that sort of, we're up here and you're down there
Right.
rock music orthodoxy. So I've never owned a Led Zeppelin album, for instance. I've never owned a Rolling Stones album. The Who, I did.
Come
Lots of
on.
Who.
Who? Yeah. I mean, I feel like John Entwistle's like effect on my bass playing is so understated, and I kind of wish I feel like a lot of punk bass players now do not think about the Who, whereas talking to somebody really accomplished like Matt Freeman from Rancid, who's a fantastic punk rock bassist, is
Yeah,
like he completely based his style on John Entwistle, just a lot faster. But I mean,
yeah.
he's pulling from that thing. So it's like these are the kind of the things you're dropping is essentially like if I had one message that I could sneak into the Batcast, you are selling that message right now. Is that like please expand what you're listening to beyond the initial listen. Like, I know your friends are stoked on this thing and this band and this sound. Go further. Who are they listening to? What do they pull from? And if you are a musician, I implore you, push past just punk rock. There is so much out there. And to be quite honest, like, you cannot just recreate what has come before over and over again. The exciting part of having Voodoo 5 on Alternative Tentacles is we're opening up a whole expansion of what Alternative Tentacles is and can be. And your very influences in your approach to, that we so simply and have fun saying Exotica. And we will talk about like your 7-inch and what went into that. And I want to talk about how your band happened and Lena, I want to know how you found your way into all this. But it's that grabbing of all these resources, these inspirations, and bringing it into the palette in which you paint your pictures with. Because if you just listen to just the first, if you just listen to the first thing you find, like you got to go beyond it.
Well, that was the thing, though. It's like, and again, I'm probably going to piss somebody off by saying this.
there's nothing more punk rock than that.
Yeah, I found that out the hard way back when, back when I said I don't want to go to that show. Their song just sounds like polka. Uh,
I
but
bet I know who
when
you're talking about.
hardcore came in, there were very few bands that were doing anything with hardcore in its early sense, other than just to play that fast. Because when that first came into the situation, it was just playing that fast was enough of a change that was the statement.
Right.
And then you go and listen to the first Circle Jerks album, and they're not just playing fast; they're really playing.
Yeah.
And on top of that, Keith Morris's lyrics are some of the best satirical lyrics about Southern California during that time.
Right.
And don't get me wrong, I am not nostalgic for the 80s because I had to live through that fucking decade once. And,
It's
you know,
overhyped.
yeah,
It's remembered with rose-colored glasses.
I remember when all of a sudden the homeless class
Yeah.
was signed onto the streets of Philadelphia. You
Yeah.
know, I remember government cheese. I remember a lot of really difficult things coming of that time. I remember the air traffic controllers strike. You know, as
One
the
of the things I
as the
one,
son of a transit worker, I remember like people really having to fight and be visible about the rights of not just you but the other guy. Mm-hmm. And now we're in a period of history where it's like, you know, I guess I should have expected that we would have to do it again.
we hope for better, but like with, I asked Jello one time. I love how Jello is like a shadow over this podcast, even though he's not here. But I asked Jello one time, I was like, is it frustrating? Because we re-released a 7-inch that he did. It's part of his album with Mojo Nixon, and it was
Yeah,
"Will the Fetus Be Aborted"
yeah.
song. And I was like, this came out early like 90. And I asked him, is it frustrating that you feel like you're arguing the same points over and over again? How do you feel about that? And he goes, it's maddening.
Yeah.
And I mean, he's like, the things I said before, the fact that they still apply is so frustrating. He goes, and not to say that progress hadn't happened. And it has. It has. But it's disappoint, it shouldn't be surprising, but it is disappointing that we find
Well,
ourselves over retreading same grounds.
remember Chris Rock's flow chart on the Chris Rock show about "Are We There?" Like
Yeah, I
the
do
Million Man
actually.
March that brought us 75,000 steps forward. Ike Turner, 77,000 steps back.
Yeah,
And you know,
feels like that.
uh, Ike Turner could be a whole other conversation because
That
good bowler. Um, but
my
the
dad met him and
idea
he
of
said
like
some crazy
just
things.
just as a for instance, like in the last 20 years in California, you saw marriage equality established and then taken away.
Yep.
And my father, SEPTA bus driver, Southeastern Pennsylvania Transit Authority, for those of you not from Philadelphia, so said like, you guys really fucked up out there because you let somebody's rights get taken away at the ballot box. And my father is not Howard Zinn, but my father is a guy who said like, no, you have the right to medical care that includes your teeth.
Yeah.
I was, I
These
mean,
weren't, these aren't technically, there was a time those weren't considered liberal thoughts. Those were not liberal ideals. Those were for the people ideals. Those were like, there's certain things that are considered that are weirdly being labeled as leftist that once upon a time were Republican and conservative, making the world better for people in our country so that they can move forward and have as many opportunities to move forward as healthy and strong as possible. Environmentalism was a conservative frame of mind. It is weird to see things, how they've evolved these
well, I
years.
think whenever you got a president from California in there, because Nixon was the one who established the EPA. Part of the reasoning was going to be, do you know how much money we make from the great outdoors? Let's protect our investment. Which is that's fine, because like to quote Frank Zappa, the message of Republicans is let's do business.
It's yeah, but
Okay, well
though
then let's
now
do
it doesn't
business.
seem accurate. Now it's just
Yeah, well, I
I
mean,
don't even know if that's accurate for where we are now. It doesn't
well,
seem like
I think where we are now is just,
on that chart.
yeah, I think where we are right now is let's just destroy anything and just turn it into something we can make money from quickly.
It's a struggle sometimes to handle that side of things, because we even see it in the audience of Alternative Tentacles, where some of the people get, Jello has been surprised, and to a degree I have, to see how many people have been more supportive of things as they are. It's interesting to see them forget that Alternative Tentacles as an entity and Jello Biafra himself has criticized the liberal, quote unquote liberal, and Democrat, more accurate, Democratic side and presidents as well. It's just that people don't listen. One of the reasons he stopped doing spoken word tours is when Obama got elected, people didn't want to hear him criticizing Obama. They didn't want to hear it. He had lots to say about it, and he's like, they didn't like me talking about it. And he goes, I stopped doing tours back then because it was like I got booed for
Yeah, well,
criticizing the president. And he goes, it was maddening because it was like there was a lot. Just okay, it's great. We have this you have a good president here. Good, okay, but there's
yeah,
still a lot. And then, we get accused a lot, like, oh, you insult Trump, you make these shirts and you do all this stuff, but where were you when, why didn't you criticize Biden? We did.
yeah,
But nobody, they just seem to skip. I mean, Jello called him the coelacanth and had this long, we brought, there was so many spoken words he did, things that we brought up, and it's just forgotten. And it's strange to see how much support has lent into it. But I mean, I understand that people are frustrated. They just want to see change. And sometimes that change means they just want to blow everything up. I just buckle up, everybody. We just took a lot of
yeah.
steps backwards.
Well, there's a sort of related anecdote to all of this is that the day that Biden resigned, uh, Biafra was here in like literally where I'm sitting now,
uh,
and with Rick from Golden Voice, and Shepard Fairey was supposed to be with us for dinner here.
yeah,
Lena is a, just an absolutely fantastic chef,
I've
nearly
heard
as good
that.
as she is a singer. So at the last minute, Shepard Fairey calls us and says, I can't make it. Something just came up. And about an hour later, we find out that Biden resigned. I went, what do you think Shepard's like all of a sudden on a tight deadline for?
Yeah,
And, and it was the Kamala poster. And believe me, I had my problems with Kamala Harris, largely that a lot of her funding came from the Amway people.
it did.
And I think multi-level marketing, also known as Mormons losing money, is it's just like really I don't I can't go all in with anybody because I realize by the time somebody gets to the point where they are a national political figure, they've been bought and sold a half dozen times.
I find it really odd how many people seem to two things came forth that I did not expect out of this whole modern time we're in. One, I didn't think that people in America took as many cues from our president as they do in terms of behavior. I was surprised to see how, because to me, I was like, I've lived through a lot of presidents, some Republican, some Democrat. I've never felt like they were an example that I had to follow. I never felt that, but it seemed to me that there were so many people who really took that on. And the second thing was, I understand that during an election period, people rally around their tribe and they're excited to support who they're supporting, and the whole point is to build grassroots support and everything. But I just have never been that rah. I don't know if it's like I'm too punk rock, so I look at everybody and I think they're all full of shit. But like, I just never thought that there, I have never worn a political shirt because I never felt that anybody captured everything that I'm looking for. They're,
No, I agree with you. But in my house, because both of my parents were union people, and my father was a bus driver and spoke to people all day, day in, day out. And you know exactly where he was speaking to them.
yeah,
You lived in that neighborhood, so you know.
I do.
And this is going back into the 70s. So if you ever have a chance to see Robert Muggy's documentary, um, Amateur Night at City Hall, which was about Philadelphia during the Rizzo years.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I'd love that.
Yeah, it's fantastic. He also did a great documentary about Sun Ra called A Joyful Noise. So shout out to Robert Muggy. Um, but the level of engagement that the average Philadelphian has with partisan politics is maybe higher than most people because there's more unions. Also, government work is the thing. Also, there's a lot of hospitals and whatever. So we always talked about it in the house. And to this day, in my parents' household, the kind of the saints of the house were Jimmy Carter and Pete Seeger
So you came
and
from a
King
very
Benson.
political household.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no, but those are the people, if they were on TV, you know, I mean, my introduction to a guy playing the guitar was Tommy Smothers, so the Smothers brothers.
Yeah.
So political humor was something I was exposed to from the time I was 3. I mean, on the new Voodoo 5 record, um, there's a song called Tropical Campfires. I dedicated it to my other first guitar hero, who was the other guy who I saw on TV all the time when I was 4. And that was Michael Nesmith.
Ah, right on.
Yeah.
Skip,
So,
you're killing me here. I'm gonna have to have you on like for a series of episodes to cover all the things that you and I need to talk about now. And I mean that on a complimentary way because this is fascinating and this is awesome. Um, but I
but we are
realize
we
like,
are getting off of the beaten thing, and one of the things though that I do want to say, um, with regard to my personal view of politics and leadership, uh, is summed up best by Molly Ivins, who that was one of the few people who, when they died, I cried like a baby because, and I saw her speak not very long before she died, and and I got to meet her, and I just, she looked terrible.
hmm,
It was months before she passed away, and I just, you know, I was so blown away by her. But she said, there are people who tell you, and you'd have a hell of a time proving them wrong, that the history of civil rights in this country is the fight to make sure that everybody gets to have what the Constitution says they're supposed to have. And that's the way I think about it. And yeah, Bill Clinton did this, this, and this, but everybody got their time being thrown under the bus by Bill Clinton.
hmm,
Barack Obama did this, this, and this, but there was also the like, man, why are you putting up pipelines? You
right.
know, um, so I understand that the struggle will always be there because for anybody to get anything done, they're going to have to give away part of the store.
Right.
The problem is, at the end of the day, you still want to recommend that you still want to recognize that you can walk into that store and have your consumership be represented, because to
Right.
me, the distance from Trump to Obama is the distance from Kid Rock to Esperanza Spalding. You
Yeah.
know,
I don't disagree with that.
it's like there was when they gave the Gershwin Prize to Stevie Wonder, they had Esperanza Spalding in there, and she sang "Overjoyed," and you just see like this beautiful young person with all the heart and skill and talent and inspiration in the world, and you go like, Yeah, that's what you're supposed to be bringing into the White House. Now you look at Stephen Miller and you go, there's the Goebbels lifetime biopic, and here's your star.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
And
mean,
it's,
there's where
you
and
know,
that's where we are.
and that's where we are. And that's why the idea of making art that doesn't celebrate that, you know, you look at Stalin's effect on Prokofiev and Shostakovich and the Russian composers that were trying to be a cultural force. And they liked being Russian, but they didn't like being told, write a love song to a tractor or, whatever,
Right.
uh, like when Shostakovich wrote his Ninth Symphony, somebody got up in Stalin's grill and said, the Ninth Symphony is a very important symphony. Look at Beethoven, look at Mahler. And so the order came down to Shostakovich, you better write something that glorifies Mother Russia. And Shostakovich wrote the most punk rock Ninth Symphony you can imagine. And within a week of its premiere, Stalin basically said, any artist behaving like that are going to have their fingernails pulled out, and sat Shostakovich up front and center for that speech.
Mm.
And if you think there's a tremendous uh, moral and philosophical difference between that type of leadership and the leadership that we have facing us right now, then also wrestling is real. And I've got oceanfront property in Arizona. From my front porch, you can see the sea. To quote American social scientist George Strait. So, I have, I have an opinion about the time I'm living in. It definitely comes from punk rock because I have to write what I know. I have to write where I am. I have to write what I understand and who I am. And part of that is the climate that it's coming out of. You know, do you think if Rod Serling wasn't looking at the effects of McCarthy, that Twilight Zone would have been what it was? Do
Absolutely
you
not.
think if Charles Mingus hadn't been looking at Orville Faubus, uh, that what he wrote would have been what it was? And the odd thing is, like, now hardly anybody knows who Orville Faubus is anymore, and thank heavens for it, except for when they read biographies of Charles Mingus or Louis Armstrong.
Right.
Yeah, and you go like, okay, yeah, the arc of justice is eventually bending towards the good guys. But you know what? Neither Louis Armstrong or Charles Mingus has been alive to see that they've outlasted Faubus.
No, they haven't, but they have. And and I think once the toothpaste is out of the out of the tube, there's no putting it back. It's just frustrating how much we have to continually retread. Um, and that's been hard to watch, obviously.
Well,
But
that's the thing. It's like just going. It's you know, is it? Are we the guardians of liberty or are we the janitors of it?
mm,
Make sure you didn't miss a spot. That was one of the things I really learned from my father was, like if your union's doing something, you go there and you be part of what that is, because precedent is going to be set not just for your local, but the transit workers in Minneapolis, uh, or the farm workers in Central California, or the air traffic controllers and all that. You know, if you're gonna bitch about anything, you better participate in it. You better
yeah.
show up. You better vote. You better do all the stuff. And that's a punk rock thing right there. Is not just, oh, be part of the change you want to happen. No, but go out and vote with, don't just vote with your vote. Go vote with your wallet.
Right.
Go vote with your, buy a ticket to that thing. Not just so you're one of the numbers in the room, but so the place that puts on that thing goes, there's a commercial future in this. We will continue to present that thing.
Hmm. Yeah.
Whether it's independent film, whether it's the Jewish Film Festival, whether, all the things that I'm part of, like I make sure that I'm in there somewhere. And it's not just, oh, I give $5 a month to the ACLU. It's
Right.
also, oh, somebody's trying to do this thing where people who are too young to play in bars have a venue that they can play in. Yeah, I'm going to go there and support that and buy a t-shirt.
Yeah. Put some money into it.
Yeah, put some money into it. That's why, don't just go to the show. Don't
Yeah.
don't don't stream people's shit on Spotify. That's, buy a CD.
Yeah. Buy a shirt. Go further. Yeah.
Come on. It's two matcha latte, from Starbucks to buy that CD. Go out there and actually commercially participate in it, because that way we can make more of these things.
Right.
Honestly, I mean, for the life of me, and maybe you understand something I don't, but I don't understand how somebody like, um, somebody whose principal commercial presence comes from streaming, who pays for that? Why do they pay for that? How does that result in, the next record they're going to make? And I'm not even necessarily talking about a Lady Gaga type of person here. I'm talking maybe about Thundercat, who I like very much. But, you see more evidence of Thundercat as a live act than you do for him as like as a recording artist.
Right.
You know,
It's definitely a unique market now. It's the way we find ourselves being channeled music in the mainstream and pop areas of, which is just popular culture. That's what that means. It's just it's been fascinating to see, how these things there's a certain, there's still very much a certain, catching a bit of lightning, but it has changed where it has become so much faster. Things have such a quick arc. And one of the things that we fight to try to do is to keep the conversation going about these releases as they come out, because it's there and it's gone. And everybody moves on to the next thing because everything is such an assault now on your senses, and you don't really get a chance to breathe. And a lot, there's an exciting quality to that because an artist could get you could find your song suddenly attached to a TikTok dance. And I'm not being mean about this, but like a TikTok thing happens and your song's on it. And then all of a sudden, all these kids love it. They use the song, they repeat it, it blows up. And then next thing you know, you're getting all these, your socials get all these followers, and you're like, wait, what's happened? And I've had that happen to my friends where they're like, what, what just happened? And it's like, oh, their song that on their record just blew up. And sometimes it's the same thing that happens when somebody's song, it's the same kind of effect that when someone's song is on, Kate Bush talks about when her song was on Stranger Things, all of a sudden she goes, I have a number one again on my track, and it just takes off and it happens again. So there is that viral effect and that very much movements that happen, which is still, it's always been, and it still exists there. But it is
in the
such a,
digital age, it's hard to study for it and try to create a path to it.
the path there is so much harder to work your way there. And, the demands on, there are some artists that are growing up in this environment that go, oh, I have to be on these and I have to create this fast content and move on to the next thing. But it is a very demanding and very low return for
Yeah.
these things. The reality, it's almost like I don't want to, I hesitate to use the word ghetto fabulous, but it's like, a lot of the presentation that we're getting about how successful things are, I'll never forget there was this piece I saw about the New York Fashion Week, and a model was there, and she was like, "Hey, I'm gonna be honest with you. I'm getting paid to be here, but a lot of these people aren't. Looks really fabulous to be here, but a lot of people are just being treated like, hey, you're lucky to be a part of it. But it's a lot of work from a lot of people who don't get much for it, and they're all going to go back to their tiny ass apartment in a bad part of town because they can't afford anything else, and they're here because they love it. So while we're looking at this this opulent, you know, brilliant, amazing thing that we're all a part of, keep in mind that a lot of people here.
Just remember, somebody's going to Fire Festival. We kill for their socials.
Yeah, exactly. And and you see things like that and it just kills you. But like, the market has definitely changed for how we sell records. And we just try to really focus that Alternative Tentacles is very much exists in this modern world as sort of a tastemaker, a we are selecting through Jello's taste the things that we find interesting and valuable, and we try to market that to the people that we have built, the community that we have built that are looking for something interesting and go from there. And then if we can get beyond them and get more people and bring them in so that they can be introduced to something interesting like Voodoo 5. That's what we're trying to do. And, so it's it's an exciting time, but it is a very difficult time. There's not a lot of time to breathe, especially post-pandemic. We've seen audiences go down. We've seen, attending live concerts that at first it exploded, but then it died down. We have an economy that's very scary. People are not spending the amount of money. It has been a collector's market for a long time, music, and now even more so. We have to cater. There's a lot of FOMO marketing that has to happen to get people to interact and participate. They want the colored vinyl. They want the exclusivity of this type of thing. And I mean, that's fine. It's exciting. It's fun. I like those things too. But it has created a situation where we are burning through people and their creativity at a speed that just is tough. We see it at the top and we see it all the way down, of people just trying to hold everyone's attention. You have to fight the noise, and you always
Well,
had.
at the age of 59, I've aged out of anything that I have to do in a kind
Like,
of
I don't give a fuck.
well, no, I mean, I give a fuck because it's still unless I just want to make solo recordings of some sort in my apartment, which I don't. I have to go out there and kind of
Play the game.
play a version of the game.
Yeah, the
And
amount that you're willing to play.
yeah, well, I want to do music. I like music. I like doing music with other musicians. I like making records.
Right.
I love records. I mean, I really round pieces of plastic with a stupid cardboard sandwich with a graphic on them. God damn, that's just
That's why
I
we're all
had
here.
those. I started buying those when I was 4, and I still have the first one I bought.
Ah.
And yeah, I still have the album cover. I had to buy another copy of the record itself because I had destroyed it by the time I was 6. But I still aspire to the things that I liked when I was younger, and the fact that I'm cavelling, which is Yiddish for I'm doing the happy dance. At the thought of being, part of Alternative Tentacles, because like this was the news of the world before social media or anything. It's like, what's happening in San Francisco? What's happening in Minneapolis? What's happening in New York? What's happening in DC? it took the form of a 7-inch presentation with some sort of picture sleeve around it. And this was whether it was Crass or the Dead Kennedys or Susie or, whatever it was.
Right.
Actually, Susie was a little high end. She was on a major, but the specials, like,
Yeah.
and anything with a one color graphic, that was probably where we were getting our information from. And the fanzines and all that. And unfortunately, fanzines are largely gone. That's one thing that the internet could do more prolifically was to, replace desktop publishing, unfortunately. So I miss that. And, everybody can do Photoshop or a version of Photoshop. So the idea of a flyer that's done with press type and a pair of scissors, it's quaint.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this being said, I come from that world. I come from the thrift shop world. I come from reject the rock orthodoxy. So I guess I'm still, very, very much using the punk rock operating system as my way to things. I'm just not doing it with bar chords and a drum set and a stack of Marshalls.
Well, that
and
actually,
there are people that when you go see them with, we went to the No Values Festival last year, and there are all these bands, standing in line behind a couple of kids going like, man, I can't believe I'm going to see Black Flag. That was my grandfather's favorite hardcore band. Not my grandfather's favorite band, my grandfather's favorite hardcore band.
right.
Think of the specificity of that. I'm glad it still exists.
Right.
And a lot of that music I still like. The Circle Jerks did that festival a couple of years ago. I think it was in Chicago, and I watched it streaming on YouTube, and I was just like, "Wow, those, they're still doing it. They look like your hippie grandfather, but they are still kicking a hole in it."
Right.
And American Idiot went to Broadway. Like these are unprecedented things.
Very. I could never imagine some of the things that we have seen punk do when I was young. I would not have predicted this kind of.
Never mind the bollocks. It's the Sex Pistols, the musical starring Tommy Tune.
Well,
with Elaine Stritch as Deborah Harry.
Well, see, this is interesting. So now we've kind of given everybody a kind of an idea of where you found yourself and where you've come to. So how does this lead into Voodoo 5 at this project? Where does that come from? And Lena, how did you get involved with all of this? Because now we're here with this incredible project that you guys have been doing. How did we get there? Do you like that pivot? That was a pretty good pivot.
He's been doing all the talking.
That was a lot to say.
How did we get there, honey?
How did we get there? Well, we got there when I got interested in Exotica. A great many of the people who were part of that first generation were still alive. So you could go visit Robert Drasnin or Les Baxter or Corla Pandit or whoever and sit around and talk and say, how did you draw this conclusion? Why did the music go this way? What were you drawing on? And that was the initial thing, was just trying to find out about it. The first composer that really made me think, I cannot be, if I want to get what's in my head into an ensemble, I can't try to be the kind of jazz musician that Lee Morgan was, or that Wayne Shorter was in the 60s. And believe me, 60s Blue Note records, to me, man, that's like my catnip. That's something I love. And so I heard some music by a guy called Raymond Scott, who's sort of the Frank Zappa of the 1930s, and a lot of his music turns up as part of Warner Brothers cartoons. You know, dun 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 da 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 da. You know,
Yeah.
Rainbow Scott.
Oh, okay.
So when I saw the way he was writing his music for jazz instrumentation, but it was not jazz methodology, that's when I went, okay, I think I got to follow this way. And first it was Scott, who unfortunately I never got to spend time with. He had a stroke and he wasn't really in a position to talk that much about what he was doing. And then after Scott, Mancini, who I never got to meet, and then Les Baxter, who I did get to know and spend time with and study his music and like literally look at the stuff on paper and go, hey, Les, what did you mean by this? Why does this work here?
Wow, that's fast. Wow.
And then after him, I met Corla Pandit, and Corla was just more of a player. So he just, you know, he wasn't really going to go, okay, well, if you think of it this terms, in the ethnography of it is this. He was just more like, oh, I just put this kind of rhythm into it. And then if you put these notes in there, it makes it sound a little more Eastern. Okay. He was more of a quick fix. And then I met a guy named Robert Drasnin, and Bob took me under his wing, and he was very much the mentor. So I went from being a guy who had an understanding of how to draw dots and stems and beams and hand them to you to somebody who had a more developed toolbox. And at the same time I came into contact with him, I auditioned for Yma Sumac's band because they needed a guitar player, and the people who were running that show just literally said, oh, we heard you play the guitar. Do you want to join her band? I mean, it was like, you have no idea whether I can play or not. And that's Yma Sumac. And they said, well, okay, we'll set up an audition. So they auditioned me with her music director, is this piano player named Cal Bessemer, who was, you know, somewhere trying to channel the mothership, very into UFOs and anti-evolution, and you know, the whole like
very eccentric.
Very eccentric. The cardinal opposite of Penn Jillette, basically. And so they hand me a page of music for a song from the Yma Sumac Mambo album. It's the trumpet part from Malambo #1. And I'm not a good reader. Most guitar players aren't. As you know, we start out in garage bands learning chord diagrams. It's not like horn players who start out in marching band and you learn to read as you're learning to play.
No, it's mostly feel.
Feel and chord diagrams.
For our tribe.
Listen to that Beatles record a lot. And, oh, that's the chord I'm missing, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, they hand me the paper and I knew the tune, so I just played the thing, you know, as well as I remembered it from the record. And they said, well, that was impressive. And I said, yeah, I didn't make that many mistakes. And I said, no, and you also played the page of music we didn't give you. So that's how badly I read. I wasn't even looking at the page. I just knew the record.
You're like,
I just played it
going.
the same as I would play Police Truck, which I can pick a guitar up off the floor and play to this day because I played the record enough. You know, so I got to be in the band and I got to be around her. And one of the things about Robert Drasnin's music was it was very much about mallet percussion with wordless female vocals. And a lot of Yma Sumac's stuff, even though it has lyrics, you don't really care about them that much because it's for her, it's just the pitch of her voice and the vocal acrobatics and the sound of her as an instrument, almost like a theremin. So cut 2 years later, I got called, would I play on this concert that would be the centennial of her birthday, her 100th birthday celebration, and sort of this cartoon version of a mambo band. And they had this woman who could sing like Yma Sumac. Would I come down and be a guest star because they needed some sort of institutional memory, you know, who had worked with her. And so I said, yeah, sure. What do you want me to play? And they're like, do you know Malambo #1? I said, oddly enough, yes, that was my audition piece. Great, fine, wonderful. So I get to the audition and there was this tiny little woman with giant dark eyes standing there. It was about 158 degrees, and it was just like, okay, let's just play this thing and get this done. And I kind of had my back to her because I was looking at the guy who was the band leader and watching him. And so doing the thing, and it starts with, and then all of a sudden this voice pops in behind me, and I just did one of these because it wasn't just the notes were right, it was the time was right, the tone was right. And I heard her, and I just went like, I could really, I got to keep this in mind, because there's going to be a time when I can really do something with this. And then we started socializing and then dating.
Oh.
And she always tells the story of how she made that really incredibly difficult for me.
Really mean to him.
Oh, I'm definitely going to have to hear at least a little bit of this. So,
and so there was a festival here called Exotica, and I was there playing Raymond Scott's music, actually. And I was with a fellow named Mark Riddle, who calls himself Marty Lush. He's got a kind of comic persona, but he also plays vibraphone, and he's the vibraphone player on the Voodoo 5 records so far.
Oh, okay.
What happened was, we were standing there, and he's a big fan of Arthur Lyman and Martin Denny. That's really where his bread is buttered. And that's really his skill set, you know. If you put Frank Zappa's mallet percussion stuff in front of him, he's going to look at you and go, "What the hell is this?" No, you know. But for the more classic Exotica stuff, he's a real student of it. And we were noticing all the groups at Exotica, and he said, you know, if Martin Denny and Arthur Lyman were to reunite, come back from the grave, and play here, they wouldn't have a place here. This is all Exotica influenced rock bands. They have more in common with the Cramps, of whom I'm quite a huge fan, by the way. And I got to know Lux and Ivy a bit, and have nothing but all the praise in the world.
Right.
But
you saw a gap. You saw
a gap between these the Cramps with surf music and theremin with burlesque dancers, and something that Martin Denny or Les Baxter would recognize as being their direct musical descendants. And said, yeah, we should really do something about that. And standing next to us when we did that was a guy named Chris Kraus, who had put on he basically did this thematic pop-up bar called Lucas Snakebite Lounge, Tiki Oasis, and Caliente. And he's very entrepreneurial. He said, if you want to make a record like that, I'll put it out. And he pointed at me and said, I know like your other records and stuff. So I said, okay, what are we going to do? And I said, well, let's get my girlfriend and, and kind of do the Drasnin recipe, because we have this perfect human instrument and vibraphones. So we've got that mallet percussion and Yma Sumac vocal thing. And certainly I know how to write for it. And Drasnin had made an album in 1959 called Voodoo. And then I supervised the reissue of that for Lee Joseph's label Dionysus, which was in the 90s. That they had one of the most amazing reissue programs, both of Exotica and Garage and Surf and East LA, and just a whole lot of stuff. So we got Bob to poke his nose out and wound up doing Voodoo 2, which I produced. And then he recorded all this other stuff after that he, when he was at the end of his life, said, like, look, I built a mountain that I can't climb. Will you tie everything together and finish it as an album? That became Voodoo 3. And somebody asked me, how much extra material is there? I said, well, there's a lot of extra material, but it's not up to his standard, because Bob was an absolutely brilliant and spotless composer. I mean, everything that people think I do well, I probably got from him and do about 15% as well as he did it.
Mm.
But so they said, so there's enough for a Voodoo 4? And I said, there will not be a Voodoo 4. Like, so that turned into, what are we going to call the group? And I wanted to name it something in tribute to Drasnin, because we were using his recipe. And I felt like after producing the reissue and the two, you know, if anybody's going to continue the franchise, I elect myself. So I called it Voodoo 5 because there was going to be no Voodoo 4, and there are 7 people in the band. I think there are actually 9 on the record, because on El Tecolote, the B-side, we used a singer named Allison Lewis, and 8 or 9. Anyway, the amount of people it says are in the band are not the amount of people who are in the band.
It takes a village.
Yeah, it takes a village idiot, actually. But that was how the group came together, and then we just started. The first gig came to us. I called Rory at oh God, what's he who does Tiki Caliente, and said, hey, can you give us a gig in your bar? He said, do you have a demo tape? He said, I said, no, we don't. You know, we just started. We need to play someplace. He said, okay, come play down here. He was like the first person to take a chance on us.
Yeah, that is really nice.
And then, you know, from and sort of once you got one gig under you, we did a few gigs, and you know, the band kept getting more dialed in. So, you know, after the band had been together for 2 weeks, we did the first Voodoo 5 album, and it came out well because I knew what everybody could do.
Right.
You know, so we had that Arthur Lyman kind of vibraphone style, and the steel guitar thing was definitely taken from Alvino Ray is the obvious one, but also there was a country steel player called Alvino Ray, who played very much like, Weldon Myrick. And Weldon Myrick had this style that sounded like he was doing a string section on a steel guitar. So combine that with vibraphone, and I played more nylon string guitar, just so I would have a different sound in my playing than the pedal steel. And then upright bass and Latin percussion. And instead of that really sleepy Exotica Latin percussion you usually hear, I grew up on the East Coast, so to me, percussion was Ray Barretto and Mongo Santa Maria and Tito Puente's band. So I wanted something with a little more fire under it. Yeah. And that also became the thing of, instead of me trying to retread the traditional Exotica styles of the past, going, no, it's, you know, I want this New York, Puerto Rican sound
feel to it.
I got from Eddie Palmieri records.
So this is the exotic sounds of Skip Heller's that we're talking about. Is that album from 2024?
No, that's a different record. That was actually done as a film score. That's called Lua Omilu.
Okay.
And
I was trying to, so people know which record this is, so they can find it.
The record I was talking about was the first Voodoo 5 album. It's called Voodoo 5 featuring Lena Marie Cardinale.
Okay.
The exotic sounds of Skip Heller. And I just wanted to call it Voodoo 5 and have it just be a band. So when I put together the band, I just basically said, well, who are the absolute best people I know for what I have in mind? And Paul Ekman had been in a band called Orchestra Superstring with DJ Bonebreak, who's the drummer for X. But this is a group for DJ to play vibraphone in. And they were very interested in Cal Jader's music. And Cal Jader's great vibraphone player from Northern California. And huge influence on, you know, the way I was thinking of the music for the group. And then a guy I met in Tucson who lived in LA, Connor Gallagher, who unfortunately we don't play very much with because everybody wants him and he's always on the road. And I can't pay him what he's worth. and they can pay him closer to what he's worth. So John McDuffie has been playing with us live, and he's no complaints there.
Yeah.
And so those are the first people I called, and they're on the first two albums and on Moon Over Marin.
Yeah.
And obviously, Lena's a ringer. She can do things that nobody else can do. I don't know anybody else with that range or that ability to deal with rhythmic flexibility like that. And just her tone is so pristine and beautiful. And Jay Work, the flute player from, I'd literally been working with him since I got off the plane in 1995. He was on the first gig I played here. He was on the first session I did here. And he's just always been the guy like, oh, God, I need this done right. I'll just call Jay. And Jay's got, and he's still here, and he still takes my calls. And
that's so nice.
He's still the right guy, because he's got this rhythm and blues thing in his flute playing that he got from like Rahsaan Roland Kirk, and oddly enough, Ian Anderson. So he has like this kind of drive in his flute playing, so it doesn't sound all laid back. And you can't really hear it per se, but there's a lot of rhythm and blues influence in the way I put everything together. And I think that's just because when I was young, the first really sophisticated stuff that I gravitated towards was Stevie Wonder and Earth, Wind and Fire.
So it's still exists
in there, and other things I collected over the years, like the sort of exotic 50s rhythm and blues stuff, like Mambo of Love by Nolan Strong and the Diablos.
Mm-hmm.
Or no, I'm sorry, Mambo of Love is Mambo of Love is Nolan Strong and the Diablos. Cool Mambo is the Shepherds. Adios, My Desert of Love, also the Diablos. And there's this whole Latin tinged rhythm and blues thing. It's a lot of desert theme, Gypsy Woman by the Impressions,
right?
Isle of Sirens by the Impressions. So that's part of the Exotica thing to me.
Yeah, no, I mean,
I hope I've gotten that in there.
You've definitely both have created this very distinct sound that I felt was immediately grabbed me right off the bat when Jello introduced me to your guys' sound. So for people listening, the exotic sounds of Skip Heller, Voodoo 5 featuring Lena Marie Cardinale and Mojave After Dark are the two records that we're talking about. They're fantastic, and you can hear them anywhere, and I highly recommend that you seek them out.
Go to skipheller.org, and we have Bandcamp links.
Perfect. Yeah, they're on Bandcamp. I'm looking at them there, and they're great. So, Lena, how did you fall into this? Because I hear his version of hearing your voice cut through at this festival, and I've listened to your vocals. I understand how it would be a head-turning moment. You are a fantastic vocalist, but I mean, I hear his very compelling argument, but I have to understand how you got convinced to do it.
Well, I studied classical music for years, so I sing in 5 different languages.
Fantastic.
And
fantastic.
My father was a Latin jazz musician.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just go way back and start, because it'll be really quick. And
take your time.
I had a severe stuttering problem when I was a little girl. I could barely speak. And it was my father, because they were going to put me like in special school. And it was my father who convinced the doctors not to put me in the school. And what he would do is he'd play the congas, and then he'd say, now, because I used to dance, I used to love to dance, and like I'd hum, and I'd just start singing, even though I could barely speak at that time. And my dad said, tell me about your day. And then he'd play something, and I'd come back at him with the same rhythm, and I'd be dancing, and I go, well, my day was I was playing with my dolls, and whatever. And my dad was like, this girl's not going to that school. She's going to live a regular life. And but it was the rhythm of my father that made me continue. And also my father was like, I want you to be like me who can't read music. I want you to learn music. And so my mother was a classical pianist. And so she played the piano. She gave it up when she married my father. But I would hear classical music all the time. And then also, as silly as it sounds, listening to Mighty Mouse, when the singer, the little girl would be like, help me, help me, help me.
Yeah.
And Mighty Mouse would come and save the day. And it was just like, I want to be like that. I want to be that mouse, you know?
Uh-huh.
And so I would just be singing at any time in my life. And when my parents divorced, I thought that I would never really sing or dance again. And when we moved away, someone took me under their wing because they heard me sing and they're like, you should be a singer. And that's when I started studying classical music. And I realized that the classical world is a sham.
Isn't it all?
I didn't want to be a concubine.
Mm-hmm.
You know, most unfortunately, you know, Placido Domingo is no longer because he was basically sleeping with his singers in order, and that's how they got ahead. And
Right.
that is that world in a lot of ways. And I just refused to do that. So I guess there was a little rebellion in me even then. So coming back to Skip, I was singing with this band, and they had told me 20 years before we should do Yma Sumac. And I'm like, yes, we should do Yma Sumac, because I remember hearing her voice going, I want to sing like her. And I would do the same thing. I'd just be singing around the house, whatever, because, you know, nobody really took me seriously because I wasn't abiding by what the status quo was asking me to do. And that was like sleep with conductors, or, you know, or just basically be a whore, you know. So I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to sing. And so 20 years later, this whole Yma Sumac came. And I remember Ego asking me, do you want to do it? And I literally, my jaw dropped. And then he mentioned about Skip, and I go, oh my God. And then there's somebody from Yma Sumac's band, only to find out that I saw him perform when I saw Yma Sumac perform at the House of Blues. Didn't even look at him. I was just completely looking at Yma Sumac like, I wish I was you.
And when you see the picture of me on that night, man, it's a good thing she didn't, because I was having a terrible hair day. I looked like Paul Westerberg.
So
I've been there.
So I had been practicing her vocals and her vocal acrobatics, and I just went, this is what I wanted. I've always wanted to do, besides singing, you know, kind of rock or punk rock, because I want to say there's a fire in me still that basically is like, you can't tell me I can't do this. And I think that that's what every musician needs to remember, because it's so easy to get lost in your sensitivity and what you do, and you want to be vulnerable and presenting your music. However, you got to be strong in this business, because it's not fun. It's not fun. I saw a lot of ugly things in this world. And also, so anyway, we get to this, and I remember him staring at me, and he scared me, because I was so guarded just by being a female musician.
Right.
I was just so guarded. And I remember telling my musical director, I said, that guy's a creeper. He's scaring me. And I did this, creeper. And they were like, and Ego said, oh, how funny, Mrs. Heller. And I'm all, you shut up. I was such a tomboy. And I still am. And I go, you shut up. And he goes, they were laughing. And then I ended up marrying this guy. It's pretty funny, because they weren't expecting that either.
We're actually trying to hook her up with the roadie.
Yeah, they did not want me with him at all. And the thing is that even when we met, my cousin was like, "Don't you see? She doesn't want to even talk to you. She didn't want to look at you." I was really, really very guarded, and it was his. He so Ego said you need to put your Instagram on public. I said, nope, nope, I don't need to. And as soon as I did, he goes, "Do you want to have coffee?" I'm all, no. I just no. And it took him a bit for him to really impress me because one, he's an amazing musician, and he also really does know music. He's like a walking encyclopedia, right?
Hmm.
And what I really loved about it is he sent me music, and I was that was my love language, not like, "Hey, you're kind of fine, you want to," and I'm like, "Ugh," you know. And I it was so sweet. It was sweet.
Genuine.
And he ended up wooing me that way, sending me music. And then what was so funny is he sent me some music from Charles Ives, and he said, "I'm sure you don't know who Charles Ives is." I go, "Excuse me, yes I do." And I just
No, I
started
think
going
I
on.
said I'm not sure if you know who, because
And I was
you
like,
know,
"Are you kidding me? I know who Charles Ives is." Blah, 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 blah. And
You made her mad.
actually opened the door for us to finally start talking because I was just like, what? And then what I really appreciate about him is that he didn't come back hard at me. He actually was very tender, and he
Mm.
also realized that I was the one so guarded, and he understood me that way. So now when we work together, he we have a really interesting dynamic when we work together because um I know what it's like to take the charge. I know what it's like to go, okay, we're in this now. We got to go really hard when
Mm.
performing. And yet, when I sing with him, I feel very safe. So I could actually sing notes and have dynamics in them, have
Mhm.
you know, uh, flesh it out instead of just like, okay, we got to hit really hard.
Yeah.
You can do, which Moon Over Marin is really great because it uses all the facets for me as far as I'm singing really sweet and then I sing the high notes. But then there's the sarcasm where I've learned in my life how to be like, "Oh, you want to talk to me like that? Okay, now you and me, we're gonna go out and step out, right?" And yet I can do all of it in such a kind of a sarcastic way. And then you have Jello come in and he sings his verse, and it's just kind of ironic, isn't it? Because you're merging all these different worlds into this song, like
Hmm.
classical. You have Skip and all his background, and then you have Jello Biafra. And every time I
as the
listen
man
to it,
in the moon, because
yeah,
Yeah.
that's how
yeah. And
Yeah.
when I listen
It's
to it, I just think it's brilliant because you're just going, don't you see how music really is with everything?
yeah.
Don't you see how music, it's all combined? And that's the universal language. But
Mhm.
we forget, we go, "Oh no, you sing rhythm and blues, you sing jazz, you sing, mambo or merengue, or you sing that," and yet music is so universal. The notes are all the same, notes, a
Right.
C note is a C note, and yet we bring it all together, and it's just such a great fusion. It's like cooking for me. It's a love. It's I cook out of love, and it just so
Mhm.
happens that I make good money out of it now doing it. However, it's really it's really a love. I'm doing it out of love,
It's
and
a creative expression for sure.
exactly. And the same thing with the whole Voodoo Five. And when he would play to me, he would play his guitar. It was really lovely and romantic. And then I would sing sometimes. And then one day I said, "So are like we are like a band?" And I just said that because he was playing music and I just start singing because I felt safe. And I think that's the most important thing about why I play with Voodoo 5, because I feel safe. I feel that, you know, as a female singer, it's so easy to go, oh, look at her, she's old, or oh, look at her, she's fat, or oh, look at her, who does she think she is, and stuff like that. And it's one of the reasons why I always step back, because it's always based on a condition on why I was singing. It's like, be an opera singer, but you have to sleep your way to it. Or I want you, you know, all this studying you've done null and void because you have to do these actions in order to become.
Yeah, actually, our toughest audience is the Holocaust survivors.
Yeah, yeah,
and because they're really like that's a tough room.
Yeah.
Like, young man, you play a beautiful guitar. Your Yiddish is not so good.
Yeah, and what they really love is they can hear the heart of us.
Right.
Even with all of that, they can just go right to the core and go, but we hear your heart.
Go on, please.
I was going to say, I think that's a big thing about Voodoo 5, because a lot of people go and they go, oh, these guys are really slick and fun and cool, and also, but we're really doing it for the love of the music. And it just so happens that we have a lot of history. We have a lot of to come. We have a lot of, we had a lot of years of training.
Well, you're both clearly masters of your craft, whether you see yourselves as masters, because I know it's an art form that we pursue our entire lives. Yeah. And, you know, at what point do we consider ourselves a master? That's for others to judge. But you both clearly bring such a large group of influences together and bring it together into this. And it, at the core of it, does seem to be, you know, not just your love for each other and your love for your craft, but your passion for this form, and it's very apparent in your work. And it's interesting to hear you talk about, you know, being a female musician, a female singer. You know, I've been in bands with women more than I've only been in a handful of all men bands. I've mostly been in bands with women, and I had no idea of the experience that they had until I was on tour for years with Tsunami Bomb and seeing what the women in my band experienced and had to go through. The subtle sexism, the adjustments of.
Oh, you got to see the subtle stuff? Because, you know, we get to see.
Oh, the overt, obviously, but like it was the little things that surprised me more, because it's one thing you think about, but like we were a punk band sleeping on floors, and we had to stop because we would play with the promoter, who was absolutely a great guy, had a great time with him, seemed completely normal, would tell us, hey, come to my place after, you guys don't have to get a hotel room, I have space, all these things. And there's something about seeing the women on stage afterwards, it just changed how he reacted to them. And it would happen again and again. And it was like sometimes it was subtle, sometimes it was overt, but it was like this change of attitude, this weirdness that would creep in. And I'm sitting here, a teenager, going, "What the hell?"
Yeah.
You know, what really? Oh, but I mean, obviously overt, you know, we've had times where our singer couldn't get on stage because they didn't believe that she was the singer of the band. You know, and I'm looking down at a festival going, "What are you doing down there?" It's like, "They won't let me in." And I was like, "Hey," you know, but so I had my eyes open to that in a way that I never would have expected or thought. So I understand how guarded you could be.
That's why, like, when you're a 59-year-old white guy band leader, one of the things you do is you when people are young, or you know, when women come into the band, or when really young people come into the band, you just sort of unravel a layer of protection around the people that you know are going to get looked at twice, and it's really, you know, it's really helpful to be in that position, because one of the things you can do is attract young musicians to you, because they know you're going to come to you're
have their back.
You're going to have their back, and they're coming to a situation that's not going to be lecherous.
I also wanted to say I first started to go, opera coach tried to rape me, and I was like, what the? And I remember, for example, I had a breakdown, and I stayed in my apartment for 3 months. You know, it was I couldn't wrap my head. And my friend, who is unfortunately passive AIDS, he lied to say he was my brother, got me out of the apartment, and he says, if sex is what they want, sex is what they're going to get, dragging me to Hollywood Boulevard, putting on like a Paula Abdul outfit on me, and saying, I'm her manager, she needs an audition. And I ended up auditioning for Vez, and I ended up getting the job, traveling the world for 7 years. And that I learned a lot about performance art. I learned a lot about performing, but I also learned starting to stand my ground, because there was a lot of sexism even in that. And I was just like, I'm not having it. And so I was a total tomboy, and then yet you look like this, you're young and you're beautiful and you look like this, but nobody really knows that's just an act. Makeup is an act, you want to sing your soul. And so, and I think that's one of the things I really appreciated about Skip and about even Jello, because Jello comes off on stage, you see him and he's this guy, he's bigger than life. And then you meet him and you're like, can I offer you, I'm making some pasta. You want some pasta? Yeah, playing with my cat. You're just so sweet. And your girl is so sweet. This is how it's supposed to be. Right. So I went to culinary school, and I work with nothing but chefs, and it really could be toxic masculinity at its finest.
You've picked two creative endeavors that are very sexist, but
poor Skip, when he met me, I'm like, I don't think so.
Oh, it's impressive, Skip. Respect to have navigated those waters, because
right?
it would be tough.
I mean,
I'm really happy with him.
My attitude was that, like if nothing personal comes of it, at least she's going to know she's working in a professional environment where she's going to be respected and not,
sidelined.
And also the key thing is I have a son. He's 6'5", right? 6'5" now?
6'4", 6'5",
yeah. And he very protective of me.
And I'm 5'2", so.
And when he was able to even go to Skip, I mean, when Skip went to him, and he was not nice either, and then he turned around, he goes, and he got in almost not like into his face, but his personal space, and he said, I'm Skip Heller, pleased to meet you. My son looked at me and he went, I like this guy.
It was meant to be.
Yeah, and even my son says, he goes, this is the guy, Mom, you should marry him, he's a good guy. And for me, I was so scared of marriage, and I think it was the best decision I ever made, next to my son, of course. And so that's what helps me to, like, he'll say, can you sing this? I'm sure, why not? Because I have the confidence. I don't feel like somebody's trying to take something away from me.
Also,
he's trying to add.
If you're trying to do something that you haven't done before in a band like this, the musicians are all really good about sort of making sure that you've got the sidewalk in both sides of the road. You know what I mean? That you're not gonna roll a gutter ball. If it can work, it will, because these musicians all are really good at making everything sound good.
Right. I'm really interested in also talking to you guys about how the 7-inch came about and the songs that you selected. And I also would like to just
select them.
Somebody else did, huh?
No, Biafra has forever wanted an Exotica version of Moon Over Marin.
I think it's great.
And
it is great.
He had heard the first album, and I said, okay, I'll do it, but you have to be on it somewhere, because
I was going to ask about that because I can't, I mean, I wanted to say, like, Lena, it's one thing to cover a song and to approach it from an entirely creative way. You're not just like, okay, we're going to do another punk rock version of this. You're
Yeah.
doing this brand, you guys have created this new form for it. But you have to sing with the fucker who sang the song. And
No, he had to sing with her actually.
yeah, well, and that's how he described it, is it was
Yeah.
like it wasn't his anymore. Um, but that's what I want to what an interesting situation to be in because you when you described his part as the man in the moon part, 100% dead on. Like that was like I knew exactly what you were
Okay.
talking about.
I'll tell you how the recipe worked for how to put this together. No, it's really because I can say this now. If you gave me my choice of any Dead Kennedy song to do, that wouldn't have been the one I would have. That wouldn't have been the one that I chose. I probably would have chosen Insight or The Prey
Uh-huh.
because
Another 7 inch, perhaps? No.
like this. I think that's it. That's pretty close to Insight. I haven't played it in a long time, but
Right.
so that's almost got a secret squirrel Morocco mole kind of
Uh-huh.
thing to it, if you know what I mean, because that's
Yeah.
So it's easy to sort of exotify that and get some spy guitar in there. So it's already got a thing to work from. But
Don't threaten me with a good time, Skip, because I'll
oh,
remember
believe me,
this. This is going to be on.
God's ears.
This is going to get released.
I would, as I said, that's a choice I would have made. Because plastic surgery disasters was kind of late in the line for me. Like I really kind of grew up on the In God We Trust and Fresh Fruit, and plastic surgery disasters was like sort of later for me. Although Frankenchrist, I also like really, and again for Ray's playing, there's some stuff he had never done before on that record that were really, as I said, it wasn't Barkwood's.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the records. So Moon Over Marin, okay, yeah, we'll do it. And when you're taking a song from the world that it was hatched in, so to speak,
Right.
think of every songwriting process as an incubator. Sometimes you've got to evolve the animal to the point where maybe it needs fins. You know what I mean? So I had to change that. Da 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 is very what we call root progression, which is sort of like your 1 chord to 4 chord, and you're gonna. That's not really going to sound exotic no matter what you do to it. So I had to change one note in that so I could change the chord progression. But what it was to get the point across, because I wanted people to hear it as an environmental song.
Yes, the words are really great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great. And
I
I
agree.
think that's why it's such a great song, even in Exotica form, because I read words. I listen to words, especially when I said years ago I had a stuttering problem. So I really listen to the tone of a voice, or the what you're really saying. And I know, excuse me, I know bullshit when I hear it. I know when people are just lying to me, and I'll look at them, I'm all, okay. I see you're trying to play. Sure, no problem. I'm the one. He seems really tough. I think I'm more of the pit bull in the family. But anyway, he barks, I do bite. And I mean that. I mean that with all sincerity, because as a performer, you see bullshit. I mean, you get paid for it. You get paid to perform. So the last thing you want in your real personal life is that. You want really, and that's what I really liked about Jello, because he's an amazing, artist and performer. And then I see him like, he's here with our cat, and he's here just being a regular guy, and you're like, oh my gosh, thank you. Not necessarily like, thank you, it's Jello, but thank you, you're human.
Thank you for being nice to our cat, because we work for him.
Yeah, and thank you for just being a real human on top of it. And that's, and so when I read the words, and then he said, well, he's going to sing. And I also love the way Skip talks to me. He goes, listen, you're going to do this song. Okay. And I'm all, sure, why not? You know, and I listen, I'm all, this is really kind of cool. Cause you know, and, but reading the words, and then it was so sweet because with Jello, I literally could tell I need to get these notes right. I need to sing on pitch.
Yeah, because
I heard it. I heard it when he was singing it, and I was like, I was honored because I'm all, thank you, Jello. Thank you.
Yeah, he's a remarkable singer, and that's something people don't.
They don't know that.
They don't. I mean, they do, but they don't. Like, is a difference between. I mean, we've had this when he's guested on some of our artists' work, and I've seen it and talked to him about it. Where I told him, I was like, you know, of course, growing up, I knew of you, and I knew your talent, but knowing you in this, we're friends. He's my friend. I can say
I'll
that.
tell you a little story.
Yeah. But the only point is that, you know, then you see him go up there and you're like, oh, oh, he's good. Like, really good. In the studio, really good.
Oh, no, forget the studio. Years ago, when they were doing the first Melvins album.
He's blushing somewhere while this conversation's happening.
No, he's not.
No, he's not. So he's not at all.
When they're doing the first Melvins album, he was staying with me in Hollywood.
His eyes twitching.
And I was actually supposed to play on Islamic Bomb, but I couldn't make the time work because I was about to go on the road.
Oh.
And so he hadn't sung in a while. He'd just been doing these marathon spoken word shows.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, man, can you even, when was the last time you sung? He's like, oh, you know. And I said, I mean, can you even still do the end of Rawhide? And he goes, I don't know. So he's sitting on my couch and he's sitting back, which is a horrible position to be singing from. And I start going, I start doing that, and he goes, Rawhide, you know, and hits the note perfectly, no warming up.
Wow.
And it was just like, okay, yeah, that's intact. Okay, no problem.
I've watched him walk out, and I mean, you know, I understand that they're all fighting, but no disrespect to the other members of Dead Kennedys, because they were all incredible. They are incredible artists, and I think they're all really amazing at their craft, and they're all important. And I'm sorry that they all don't get along, but that's them. But I will say that I've watched Jello walk out and get in front of a band, and I've seen it in front of. He's done it in front of Arnocorps. He's done it with Primus. He's done it with the Descendants. He's done it with a number of incredible bands. He walks out, and for 3.5 minutes, they are the Dead Kennedys, and he just and you know.
Yeah, well, we grew up on that, so we know how to.
He just transforms. We know our
role in the culture if we're getting pulled behind him.
Yeah, and I've watched him walk out in front of a stadium of or an auditorium, a coliseum of people, and he just he'll command it.
Yeah.
And you don't. It's easy to forget that. I will tell everyone, because I feel like people listening to us are like, yeah, of course he does. Because if you're listening to my voice right now, you know him as this performer. You've seen that. But like when you meet him and you get to know him, he is a fan of music. He's a big nerd for music. He's a collector. He's a person. He's a real person. And he's a lot more than just Jello Biafra when you meet him and you become friends with him and you get to know him. But then you are reminded of who you're talking to.
When you're talking about your older parents.
Yeah, you're just like, he comes out and
when you're talking about your older parents and you're like guys who are the same age and, oh, did you run into so-and-so when you went to that city and all this stuff? All of a sudden he's just like, he's one of your regular pals. It just so happens that when he comes out of that when he comes out of that phone booth, he's going to have his Jello Biafra suit on, and he's going to hit police truck and just kick a hole in you.
Yeah, he's gonna work it, and he's hesitant to perform now because of heart stuff, and it's a shame because I love when he guests and he does that because I think it's very integ. He's worried about delivering a performance to the quality that he has always delivered, and
Yeah.
I had a stroke, and it definitely changed how I had to approach music and my performances. But I've tried to tell him, I was like, I still am able to deliver something that is me. No, I'm not jumping as high and doing pirouettes like I did when I was a kid, but I am still delivering a performance that I'm proud of and inherently is me. And I don't feel like I've sacrificed anything. Continue to guest because you'll find yourself in there. You're still there. But I will say, like, his approach to this was, I knew when I first heard when the tracks were sent over, and I'm going to play it on this podcast. I know it's a long podcast, but I will throw it in here. I want people to hear it. Um, he kicks in, and I was like, I had forgotten that he was coming. I knew it, but I was so into what you guys were doing, your approach to the song vocally and the way it was composed and how you had changed the chords and how it arranged it. And I was like, this is fantastic. And then he kicks in and I was like, oh, what? Oh, hey. And I was like, yeah, it is a Man in the Moon approach. His entire approach to the song is so different from his original approach. And it's so cool to hear him
No,
in
he was
it.
very sweet about letting me
Tell him where to
uh,
go.
uh, uh, say like,
Yeah.
can't do it that way, otherwise you're going to be cracking a walnut with the jackhammer. And here I'll give you what the recipe for the arrangement was really. And see, have you ever seen a movie called Radio Bikini?
I've heard of that. I don't think I've seen it.
Okay, it's a documentary about when they exploded nuclear devices at Bikini Atoll,
Ah, yes.
and it
I've heard of
rendered
it.
the island inhabitable.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I said, you know something? I'm going to try to approach this as a cross between an Elvis Hawaii movie, because there's always that scene in Paradise Hawaiian Style and Blue Hawaii where there's Elvis singing this beautiful thing about, how about the environment that he's in as he walks down the beach strumming the ukulele. And what if he was doing that on the island of Bikini Atoll?
Oh my God.
And one of the things that Biafra and I share in common is a deep love for film noir. So I was trying to
Yes.
think about, can I get a film noir element in there somehow? And what are the great film noir movies that have some kind of water in them?
Right.
And okay, Touch of Evil, nah, it's not the same thing. But then I thought of Night of the Hunter.
Oh,
And you know how you hear the children singing in Night of the Hunter?
uh-huh. I
That's when I
do.
went like, okay, that's kind of how I'm going to have Biafra as this sort of like shadow voice in there somewhere. And then when I was writing the arrangement, I went like, oh, wait a minute. What if I had him do an Alfred Hitchcock kind of MacGuffin uh, thing where he's the man in the moon? And then to make it a little more Hawaiian, so it's traditional exotica, we used lap steel instead of pedal steel.
Oh,
Because
okay.
that way the tuning would be more indigenous Hawaiian. And and then after that it was just trying to make sure that everything sort of because I didn't want to leave anything out of the song. I think it's a great song.
It's a great song.
And no matter what you do with it, don't chop it, you know. So I think it's over 4 minutes, our version. And everything is in there, and I didn't chop anything out of it. So that was the recipe was Elvis movie set on the island of Bikini Atoll after the island had been rendered uninhabitable. And if you haven't seen Radio Bikini, see it, but be prepared because it'll tear your heart out.
It's heavy.
Meets Night of the Hunter. It meets just, all these, there's a great record store in the Bay Area, Down Home Music. And I had bought, just to study the pedal steel guitar, because I've been a country music fan all my life. I've always bought these Hawaiian music compilations that they have, because there's some really incredible steel guitar players that exist away from, the country music mainstream. So I knew a little something about like what the steel should sound like. And that's when I said, like, yeah, let's use lap steel instead of pedal steel. And Connor Gallagher, the steel player, had this beautiful period precise steel and really got the sound. And there you go. And just have Marty do his Arthur Lyman thing over top of it, so it has that Martin Denny vibe, because Biafra told me he tried to get Martin Denny at one point to record it, and which would have been interesting.
That would have been interesting.
But the other thing is, I didn't want it to be like one of these, like, ha ha ha, look at how cheeky we are cover tunes. So I wanted people to hear the song, and even if they didn't know it was a Dead Kennedys song, I wanted them to hear a song.
It sounds like your song, and I think even he said that, like, he felt like this in this moment it's a Voodoo 5 song. It's not.
I hope
it's not.
That's awesome to hear. That's a nice compliment.
toes. Try not to step on any bones. I turn around, then I go home. I slip back through my basement door, switch off all that I own below, dive in my scalding wooden tub on my beach at night,
bathe in my moonlight. There will always be a moon over Marin.
And
Yeah.
then the B side, I gotta
I was
say,
going to
is
ask.
like, yeah, it very.
'Cause I love it. It's fantastic.
Biafra
B-side.
and I have bonded over. No, I do not like most of modern rock. It's just I have the stuff I like, but like Biafra comes in my record room and goes, "What? You don't have any Magma?" No, but I have like 40 Eddie Palmieri records. Come on. So one of the things though that I have an abiding love for is 60s rock instrumentals, not surf music per se, although there's a certain amount of surf, but just interesting surf instrumentals. So Buzzsaw Twist by the GCs, El Tecolote by Calvin Cool, anything by the Shadows, anything Joe Meek. I'm really into Joe Meek. That's the stuff that I really have just an abiding interest in. And Biafra actually had a copy of the Calvin Cool record of El Tecolote in good shape, which I never did.
Oh, wow.
And he played it in fact, he was DJing one night in Silver Lake. I forget what the place was called, but that was this was long before I met you. And the person who I wound up sitting with that whole night was his friend Shep, who noticed that I was wearing a Van Halen t-shirt and says, "Yeah, I was up for designing the cover of their new album, and I didn't get the gig." And I didn't realize until we had been talking about Van Halen X, the Dead Kennedys, and Funkadelic for an hour that I was talking to Shepard Fairey, which turned out to be really kind of a nice surprise.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
I said, what's your favorite? Who is your favorite politician to work for, Clinton or Obama? He said George Clinton. Yeah. But so when it came time to put a B-side on the record, I said, well, what about El Tecolote? Because Biafra wanted something he could DJ.
He didn't tell me that. That's interesting.
Yeah, he said, if you could put on something that I could maybe DJ. So I decided, well, what about a version of El Tecolote that's more Latin? Because there's no Latin stuff really on AT. I don't think there's even any rock and Espanol stuff that I've seen on the compilations.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think so. I mean, at this point, I don't want to shock anybody out there that is a walking encyclopedia for our record label, but I am still to this day discovering things and bands that are on this label. It is a rabbit hole that I love diving down into.
Yeah.
But I don't believe we have anything like that.
So I thought, well, let's be the first one through the door with that. But I said, instead of just trying to do a cover of it like the way it was, because oddly enough, it was written by Gainel Hodge, who is the ghostwriter of Earth Angel.
Oh.
Yeah, and if you look up Gain El Hadj, and you just go like, wow, this guy's around a lot. He's one of those guys like Richard Berry, who's kind of an unsung force in '50s Los Angeles R&B, which
I'm going to
makes
tell everybody in the description of this podcast to get their Google ready because
yeah,
I know.
this has
So
been a
awesome.
lot. I'm not mocking, with respect. I love how many references you brought up, and I really hope people are looking them up.
yeah.
So
I hope they're listening to Doo-Wop while watching Night of the Hunter with the sound turned down. But the
I
other
want that.
but the other co-writer on it was Shorty Rogers, who came out of Stan Kenton's band and had a big career as a West Coast jazz guy in the '50s. Art Pepper was in his band and all that. And then later on, he wound up writing a lot of the arrangements for the Monkees records. And this whole thing was cut at a studio called Gold Star at the corner of Santa Monica and Vine. That's where Phil Spector, who was a dear friend of mine, did his stuff, and Herb Alpert did his stuff, Buffalo Springfield and all this. And the engineers on those records were either Larry Levine, who was a really good friend of mine. In fact, his son was just here for Passover.
Oh,
Or another guy named Stan Ross. And Stan was one of those, he was like my Jewish uncle who was like, son, in this business, a great engineer, but also just what a hell of a avuncular. Look that word up, and that's Stan. And so it was a way for me to like have a thing between Biafra and I about a record we both love.
mm-hmm.
And also to be able to introduce the Latin element into it, which is such an important part of my musical perspective and hers. And then on top of that, just to be able to sort of pay tribute to Gold Star. So that was why we chose that. And I said, well, if I'm going to make it sort of Latin, let me make it really Latin. And to Biafra's credit, the only note he gave me on the whole mix on either thing was, can you make the pedal steel guitar a little less loud coming in and pan it out so it's like, question, call and response between the do do dong dong do do dong do do dong dong do dong dong, because I told the steel player to play like Speedy West,
Mm-hmm.
who was this really crazy steel guitar player. Maybe the first country music avant-gardist. Because you listen to his playing, he's one of those guys like Eddie Van Halen who he's doing it in a very 3-minute pop song context, but you realize there's some very radical musical thought going on in terms of the way he's filling in the spaces. And the only thing Biafra, said was like, do this one little change. And so it's more call and response. It's like, okay, great. I mean, he really was, he treated me like he had a lot more faith in me than other people who had, more right to demand things. You know what I mean? Just or actually less right to demand things. Make it more like this. Okay, whatever. Because usually when you get hired to do some music, they're hiring you because you're the expert and they're not. Otherwise, they'd be doing it. And then, no, I mean, that's welcome to doing stuff in the world of film music. It's like, no, trust me, you don't want a trumpet there. They're about to kiss. It's the wrong instrument.
Right.
And then you get somebody like Jello Biafra who has very definite ideas about how a record should be mixed, how a record should be mastered. And, he and I got into a real fist-pounding argument over Johnny Remember Me by John Layton, because in the mastering originally, or in the mastering for the 7-inch 45 that came out in 1961, nerd alert, the mastering process, which kind of compressed the record a little bit. But somebody just did a pressing, a guy named Alan Wilson did a pressing on 10-inch vinyl of it as the master tape was, without the final stage. And the record just sounded huge. It sounded as big as a Lee Scratch Perry record. And that's another guy you should Google if you're really interested in. Lee Scratch Perry is like the genius
Fantastic.
record producer of Jamaica. He produced a lot of the early Bob Marley stuff. The exciting Bob Marley stuff is all the stuff Lee Scratch Perry produced. And and this was like an hour and a half, well past the usual. How come you don't have any magma? And the funny thing was that night we wound up sitting around listening to Grigri by Dr. John, because I had just gotten the mono pressing of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of led to the Mojave After Dark album, because I went, Exotica is usually kind of a fictional music. It's meant to conjure up a place that doesn't really exist in life.
Right.
Here's a guy that made an Exotica record about New Orleans. What if I made an Exotica record about the California desert? Because when you're a married couple taking long drives in California, you're encountering a pretty fair amount of desert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with all this stuff, and this is a mark of getting older, your work becomes more biographical, not in the sense of, I'm going to sing you my autobiography, I was born in the same hospital as Will Smith in 19. It's not that. It's your taste asserts itself more. Your idea of what's natural to you asserts itself more. The education you've given yourself asserts itself more. So all those Dead Kennedys records, spaghetti westerns, Robert Drasnin records, Yma Sumac records, John Barry film scores, all the stuff, all the film noir, all the Twilight Zone. Because before Voodoo 5 formed, my main thing was something called the Hollywood Film Noir Orchestra, where we just did, I transcribed film music right off of DVDs and said, okay, putting together a band to play that. And that stuff is all so heavily part of my taste that when it came time to make a band and make a record with that band, and the people in this band, these are our friends. These are who we eat with. We don't just see them at the gig. This is who's at the Seder or who's at the birthday party. And
we have a once a month open house where I make food and they come in, and we just had one and it was really nice. Maybe one day you can come.
Yeah, please come visit us.
I would be absolutely honored. I would love to.
I love, that's my love language. I love to feed people. The only way I could describe Voodoo 5 is, as silly as it sounds, the movie that I'm gonna sound really like a neophyte next to this guy. But like when you listen to the movie, when you watch the movie The Guardians of the Galaxy, I know that sounds really silly, but remember the character Groot, where he was the tree and all he could say is Groot, right? Groot. And yet he sacrificed his life for these Guardians of the Galaxy, right? And it's really touching also. But then at the end, he comes back. Right. And he comes back and as if he never left, right? And he grows into Groot again. The thing that's so beautiful about that is it's always evolving. Music's always evolving. And when we think it's over, it still comes back. It still comes back. However, and whatever facet it does, whatever style, it's going to come back. And that's what's really exciting, because for oldies like us, we still have the passion, and it has nothing to do with our age. It has everything to do with the love of the art and the love of the music. And so he can write music, where it's like you hear Joe Meek in it, and you hear Yma Sumac, and you hear Tito Puente, and you hear, we can go on and on about different, musicians, and yet it's all been, coming to like this, and then like a laser, and that's what's exciting about it, because you realize, like, man, these people who are writing music, I want to say the old timers, but the old guard, I guess. You hear all their history
Mhm.
Yeah,
in
but you
one
also
note.
hear a disregard for, oh, I'm worried that people aren't going to like this or it's
Yeah,
not
it's
going to
true.
be hip. And it's just like, you know something?
I don't care.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
get
we're the official Exotica band of the AARP. It's like, you know, it just in terms of my first concert was Elvis Presley. I can't really be that worried about
What you're wearing while you're singing,
yeah,
what you're
what
wearing
you
while you're playing, what's your instrument is.
or even how is what I make going to reflect itself next to somebody who looks at Weezer as a legacy band. You know what I mean? Like I'm too old for that. I'm aged out of it. And again, you know, the only rock star for me who ever was really any kind of role model was Frank Zappa. And there was somebody who definitely did not give a fuck about the rock orthodoxy.
right.
You know, like yeah, that's great that you're doing hey hey mama with the way you move, gonna make you sweat, gonna make you groove. That's really yeah. Here's a song about Republicans or dental floss, you know, because
Yeah.
but I always thought that you know like that it's interesting because you look at certain people who let's just say during the height of their time uh, if if they go out with their gray beards now and sing that same shit that they sang, you know, Brian Setzer probably should not be singing about how she's sexy in 17.
That's
Probably not a great idea, but you know,
some things don't age well.
no, but you look
Yeah.
at what Dave Alvin wrote during that same time. Uh, you know, and anything that Dave Alvin sang on the first Blasters record, uh,
Mhm.
you know, except for maybe Hollywood Bed. He might want to add a verse about Viagra in there, but the or what Stan Ridgway wrote when he was with Wall of Voodoo or whatever. You know, those are people doing their best to make the most intelligent statement they could make
Yeah.
from early on. So they don't really have anything to apologize for. And yeah, okay, that snare drum sound is a little Phil Collins. Okay, got it. But, you know, everybody's going to make the mistakes that are in the marketplace at the time. But are you writing the best version of yourself that
Yeah.
you can write?
Yeah, that's it.
Are you giving your audience credit for intelligence?
100%.
You know,
Because I hear that a lot. I hear a lot of really dumbed down things, and I'm like, how insulting. Why music industry do you want to insult us so much, when the truth is that music is it, you can learn so many things from music.
So,
okay.
unfortunately, we had a bit of a connection cut off there. I don't know if it'll make it into the last editing, but I wanted to thank you so much for this incredible conversation and an incredible episode. Skip, I really think we should have you on an episode and have you be able to spin records, like drop in and just like talk about influences and talk about some of the pieces, because I think it would be a really fun podcast.
Well, actually, the fourth Monday of every month, I have a show on kchungradio.org at 4 to 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, the fourth Monday of every month. Hit the Chinatown feed. Yeah, and I spin entirely off of 45s.
That's fantastic.
So if you don't like what I'm playing, you only have to wait 3.5 minutes.
I'll put that link in the episode description and have people check out the show. That would be fantastic.
Please do. And our socials are on Instagram, Voodoo, and then the number 5, and then Exotica. So please follow us on Instagram, obviously. And, you know, we do leave town to play gigs, you know, have love, will travel.
That'd be fantastic. I definitely recommend everybody to check it out. It is fantastic. Look into this band. The 7-inch is on pre-order right now, and it drops on June 13th. So it's coming. So We're really excited about it. It's fantastic. You guys did a fabulous job. Thank you so much for doing this 7-inch with Alternative Tentacles. We're all really excited about it. And I still think I hope I'm gonna lobby for more out of you guys. I'm gonna push. So at least my part. Hopefully this will have you guys on again. And we'll do
I
more
would,
records.
I would love to. I would love it. I would love to see you again, and I'd love to do another release for AT because it's just,
Fantastic.
well, when I was a kid, I used to draw the bat logo on my high school notebook and all the stuff. So, it's really. Just even getting to have a hamburger with Jello Biafra, it's like, whoa, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I've had an odd life just in terms of how many people whose records I grew up collecting that I've gotten to work with over the years. And Biafra was the one whose records I really collected the most prolifically back then, and read every interview and every fanzine and all the stuff that goes with it. So getting to be part of AT has been just such an incredible thrill for me, and getting to meet you and Freya and Anne Marie and everybody has just made me feel like I showed up at the right place. So we both say thank you so much for having us be part of everything.
Well, thrilled to have you, and I'm so very excited about this record, and I cannot wait. I know that Alternative Tentacles is going to be bringing back our Tentacle Fests and our shows, and I really hope we get to have you guys on some dates. That would be fantastic.
Oh, I hope so too, just because, I've never gotten to see Tsunami Bomb. I've never gotten to see the darts, I'm just like, Biafra, old news.
Seen him. I think you'd enjoy it. The shows are always a really great mix. So you guys would definitely be an amazing addition. So thank you so much, Skip. It's been an absolute pleasure. I definitely can't wait to have you on again. Please come back onto the show. And seriously, you and Lena, thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to
Lena's
seeing you
smiling and waving from the back of the room.
Perfect.
No, any time, and as I said, come visit us in LA. We'd love to have you and your betrothed.
Yeah, I will 100%. I'll let you know when I'm coming down. All right, thank you so much, everybody. This is the Alternative Tentacles Batcast. My name is Dominic Davi. You know me from Tsunami Bomb, but you also know me as being dragged back into the world of Alternative Tentacles no matter what I do. So, thank you so much for being here on this amazing episode of the Batcast, and we will see you next time.